And it's a joy to be with you today. And as our topic today, I wanted to do return to normal. Have you heard this? People use this phrase very often lately. I know I have. It is, and actually we've been using this phrase now for the last year, return to normal. And what does that mean? I mean, oftentimes when people use this phrase, and I sometimes use it, I say return to normal, and I do this little gesture, meaning that normal, it's like a question, what is normal? And I think all of us, because of this pandemic, there's this sense of yearning to return to something familiar. This is an unusual situation. And usually the human condition is such then that when we find ourselves in an unusual situation, we're unaccustomed to it. We don't know what to make of it. And we say, gosh, I wish things were just normal. But here we are now, a year, it's going to be pretty soon, year and a half into this pandemic, and things are not normal. And we still don't know when they might return to normal. And then maybe there's even a question in our minds, will they ever return to normal? And do we even want them to return to normal? Now, I know that's maybe a little bit of an extreme statement, but we have to ask that question because I think back in America, there's this term that is used, it's the good old days. It seems to be a tendency in many people when they get older, perhaps time, a bit of time has passed, and they start looking backwards and they say, oh, in the old days, it was so much, usually they say better this, and there's a nostalgia for going back. And anytime something is disruptive, we yearn, there's a human nature, we yearn for stability, to look backward to the way things were before, because what we're doing is the unusual situations that are confronting us. Something different has come into our life. It's challenging, it's different. Naturally, there's a tendency to kind of say, wait a minute. We don't usually just all of a sudden embrace it. It's an inborn conservative nature to, you might say, return to that which seems normal to us. And here we are in a very unusual situation that has come upon us for the last year plus. And it's natural, of course, for us to want to return to that normality. But I do think we need to ask ourselves, do we really want to return to that? And what is it that we want to return to? And might there be a better way to look at this than just a return to the past? Rather than going to the past, why not leap forward into the future? Think in terms of, here we have an opportunity for something better, perhaps, or certainly something different, and might, instead of our natural pattern as humans to just yearn to go back to the familiar, embrace the possibility for something even better coming to us in the future. Swami Kriyananda used to, oftentimes he would use this image of how people, they engage in life, they face the challenges of life, and they recoil from them. And there's this human desire to they daydream about their cottage by the sea. And so whenever Swamiji would talk on this particular topic, people say, oh, it's the cottage by the sea talk that Swami is going to be giving. And it's this yearning, and sometimes Swami would use this French phrase, but the translation was a desire to return to the mud. In other words, rather than responding to the challenge of being human, of greater awareness, people want the security of returning. Oh, I don't want any challenges. I want to be in my cottage by the sea, in retirement. Maybe I have a little rose garden in front of me, and I get up in the morning and everything's nice. And he says, you do that for a while, go there and do that for a month, and you'll be bored stiff. The human nature just does not like that, because the human nature is expansive. It wants something new. And whereas this phrase, also an Americanism, how are you today? And a person will respond, oh, I'm happy as a clam. Now, it's an odd phrase because clam, just lives at the bottom of the sea, no challenges, and just in the warm sea. And I guess it's fairly content there, and it has no challenges. And so, but is that really what we want to be? I don't think so. And in any case, usually I've found that with nostalgia, with looking back to the good old days, returning to normal. Oh, yes, it was normal. Everything was, I knew what was going to happen. It was secure. That the past is usually rosier in our memory than what it really was. And is it, if we look back, this return to normal, and I understand what it really, I use the phrase often in this last year, oh, when things get back to normal. And I too understand it, but I think it's time, because this pandemic, I do think, is going to be winding down. I've said that before, but I do think this time, by the end of this year, it's going to wind down, and things are going to be post-pandemic. Now, is that normal? I don't know. That's for us to be able to decide. But I do think things do go beyond what we've been facing, the challenges we've been facing now. I do think we need to think about, where are we going forward? For us in Ananda Sangha, we've been thinking along those lines. We're starting to ask one another administratively, where should we go? What's next? What are we going to do next? How are we going to expand? How are we going to, what have we learned from what we've done in the last year and a half, and how can we apply that and go forward, but yet not return to the past, go forward in a creative way? And so we're applying this, and I suspect this question to our own administratively within Ananda Sangha, but I think all of us are probably doing that also individually. Something's interesting has happened over this last year. And now, when this passes, this pandemic will pass, what is it that we're going to take from this and go forward? I don't think things will be like they were before. I know many people that I have known have found new ways to approach their lives. Number of people that have expressed to me, says, I'm not going back to that old way of doing things. I'm going to change my job. A number of people have told me that. I'm going to look for new opportunities. I don't want to do that anymore. And you find this socially. I've noticed this in where I'm from now in America. While I'm here, people are saying, yes, I'm not going to go back to that old job. I'm going to look for something new. And in that sense, this pandemic, although it's been very much upheaval to all of our lives, and it's caused a great deal of suffering to many people, at the same time, it's opened up opportunities for us. I know one fellow I know in Delhi who wrote me just the other day, and he said, I've had to cut back on my job, or my job cut back on me, his business cut back on me. And he says, I've had to look for something new, but I've decided to take up something I've always wanted to do. I wanted to be a life coach, working with people one-on-one. And he started a new business in that way. I know somebody in Pune, a medical man, who's started doing consultations online. And it's been and it's opened up for him, and a lot of opportunities have presented themselves to him. Many people have said, well, in this situation, I've decided to finally move from not on my job, I've decided to move my family from one place to another place. And so consequently, those things, it's presented a time, this COVID has presented a time when people, perhaps they've been forced into it, but nevertheless, they've responded to it positive to look for new challenges. Well, the point I'm making here is that whenever there are challenges in our life, whenever there are difficulties in life, the tendency is first to retreat from those challenges and, oh, I wish that challenge would go away and I could go back to something normal. Or I wish things were like they were before that I was presented with this challenge. But when a challenge comes, what that challenge is saying to us, it's shaking us in a way, and it's saying something else is trying to happen. Now, this was a phrase that Swami Kriyananda used frequently. It was something he had heard. Somebody else, a friend of his, had begun using this term, and he liked it a lot. He said, when difficulties come, when there's times of upheaval, when things seem to be changing underneath you, he said, we should respond to it in a way by asking the question, what is trying to happen here? And he would use that phrase in perhaps in meetings when things were unclear. It was hard to get clarity on a direction forward. He would step back and he would ask that question, what's trying to happen here? And the way Swami would do that, he would withdraw from the environmental present circumstances that were determining his decisions, which tend to be environmental and intellectual, and withdraw and saying something new is facing us. I need an answer. And he would engage that part of himself that was creative. He would say, I'm looking for something new. And he would use this example when he was creating music. Now, music is a creative act. You're trying to draw from the higher realms, from the superconscious, ideally, something new that hasn't been expressed before. And he would meditate, and let's say he was writing the music, or he was trying to write something, or perhaps share in a lecture something new. He would meditate and he would elevate his consciousness into a high state of calmness first, and then ideally joy and attunement. And then he would broadcast to the universe. He said, I need an answer. And if he was creating music, he would say, I've got a certain mood or a certain inspirational idea. Divine Mother, I need a melody. I need a melody. And somehow he would then start whatever his creative endeavor was. And he would have that openness, and maintaining that uplifted sense of consciousness, he would then put energy into motion in that direction, and inspiration would come to him. Now, it was amazing to watch this happen with him. He became, an open channel for inspiration to come into him, and a melody would come that was totally unique, totally beautiful, and inspiring. And then one thing would lead to another. Then he would come up with words for the music, or sometimes the words would come first and then a melody would come to accompany it. And he would say, this is how we should go forward as devotees. We should look for inspiration, draw inspiration to us to do something new, rather than just simply going back and doing what the past had dictated for us. Now, you could say, well, that's good for you, Swamiji, to do that, because you're a genius in your own way. But he would say, this is what we should, all of us, trying to be a channel for something new, especially when challenges are facing us in life. Is the first impulse of just doing what we've always done before. There's a certain security to that. It's natural that we do that. And honestly, we probably most of the time, that's what we have to do. He says, but use every situation, particularly challenges. He says, use those things when things are different. We may not even define them as a challenge, but something is up in upheaval, and the ground is shifting a little bit in your life. Divine Mother, in those moments, is summoning something from you to respond to that moment in a new and creative way. And summon, if you can, that creativity. And I've often told you this story of when I asked him for direction on a certain question I had. He just said, Jaya, it's simple. Look for opportunities and act on them. And in other words, don't just go by rote what you did in the past. Look for opportunities. And the two words that were important in that sentence were look and act, you see. And so for us, we might take that to mean be open. To look means to have an open mind and look to the future and then act. So here we are in this pandemic, and we have this desire to return to normal. That's the intellectual side of the brain, wanting to return to stability. That which has gone before, I want to return to that pattern. It's safe, it's comfortable. I want to go there. But also, maybe you use that as your default position, but also look for those opportunities. Now, I was thinking about this, waiting for the webinar to start today. And I thought of that, how the scientists say that dinosaurs were wiped out because an asteroid hit the Earth. I read an article about it a couple of days ago. And it basically, I think the dinosaurs were probably on the way out anyway. That's what the scientists are thinking now. But it was the coup de grace, you might say, that wiped out many of the species of the dinosaurs. But you might think, if you're from the dinosaurs' point of view, oh, that's a terrible thing, that all the dinosaurs have gone. Well, from the mammals' point of view, they said, this is great, because they say when the dinosaurs disappeared, it opened up an ecological niche to allow the mammals and species that have descended and evolved from them an opportunity. You might say it removed the weeds in the forest that was blocking the sunlight, that it was allowing those flowers to blossom and prosper. And you could say that challenges that come into our lives. Now, I don't want to say COVID is anything like an asteroid, or the things that we face in our individual life are not that drastic, but nevertheless, they're an expression of something similar. Difficulties, challenges come into our lives, and the question is going to be, how do we respond to it? Might this be a time for a new beginning? Now, you could say in COVID, I've mentioned, maybe it's a time to change jobs, change locations, or change the way you approach life. I know a number of people just have changed jobs in that way. I don't want to go back, as I said, to those old things. But I think it's a time for us to be creative. And creativity is one of the qualities that define this age that we're moving into, that we're living in. A friend of mine, a fellow teacher, was giving a discourse on Dwapara Yuga a few weeks ago, and he made an interesting point, which I think is valid, about how Dwapara Yuga is the age of the individual, and particularly one of the elements of it is time for a lot of energy. It's true. He says, but it's also a time where it's an age of creativity. It's you could say he used the image of we're moving from the Muladhara chakra, Saturnian attitudes, to something higher, the Swadhisthana in this case, a fluidity, and also something that's in tune with the Swadhisthana, the second chakra, would be creativity. And we're moving into an age where individuals are no longer bound by rigidity of organizational and doctrinaire, ritualistic approaches to life. The openness that comes with high energy, able to express in a new age, one of the qualities of that is individual creativity. And I think you find this happening worldwide, that the form and the solidity of past ages has begun to break down, and new abilities expressed in which we often say Dwapara Yuga energies are before us, allowing us to do new things. And I think it's important for us, and my friend was making this point, that to be in tune with this age is to be creative. It's an important part of spiritual growth, is to do something creatively and approach our life creatively, not just by rote. Approach that's to our daily life, but also to the patterns of our life, but also to bring creativity into our thinking, bring creativity into our spiritual life, bring creativity into our approach to Kriya Yoga, into our spiritual practices. Just don't do things by rote. Oh, this is what I did yesterday. And now you do have to put some boundaries. It doesn't mean that we do something differently, but we take that which has been given to us and we give it a new, fresh approach and expression, perhaps. And so when a disciple asked Master, is this a new religion? He says, no, there's no new religion. It's a new expression of religion for this modern age. And so I think if we approach our spiritual practices in that way, it keeps them fresh. I think we're all alike in this way. We can fall into a rut, a pattern. We did it this way yesterday, and we do it this way again. And we wonder why sometimes in our meditation, sometimes in our practice of our techniques, we tend to reach a certain plateau, and it begins, our meditations, our spiritual practices become dry. And we begin to lose that newness, that freshness that was there when we first came on the spiritual path, when we first began to meditate and practice Kriya. And we need to freshen that up. And this is the bringing in creativity. Now, creativity is more of an element, not so much of the brain. It's an element of our intuitional approach to life. It's the ability to draw inspiration through the intuition from the universe, but it's also bringing in the heart element to what we're doing in life. And so being a channel for creativity through our heart, through our thinking, is dependent upon our ability to go beyond simply the mental approach to the spiritual life, to channeling and attuning ourselves to that super conscious element of the spiritual life and drawing that down and applying it in some way in our daily life. Master said, you do everything you do, try to think of ways to do it in a new way. If you walk to work every day or you drive to work every day, why not take a different path? That's a pretty simple, mundane thing. Of course, be practical in this thing, in whatever we do, but just approach things fresh is what I'm saying. And don't rely simply returning to the old patterns. Now, I started off this, talking about this as applied to returning to normal in terms of COVID. Well, this is a chance. Think about think about using something other than just going back to normal. What are we going to do? Have we adopted new patterns in what we do in our day-to-day life that actually maybe it's better than what we were doing before? So from the challenge that we've been faced with in this pandemic situation, is there some positives that have come out of this? And it's always good to be looking for the positives. If we always just like, oh, I wish it was like before, well, maybe we're missing the opportunity to learn something new. So I guess, as we were talking last week about learning our lessons, what have we learned that is positive that we can take forward into the future? And what might we do? In other words, is there something we can act upon that might help us to go forward? And this is maybe change jobs, change where you live, change some of the patterns that you found yourself stuck in, change your daily routines a little bit, change how the family has interacted. What about your health? Have you changed certain patterns that maybe allow you to be more healthy? Or perhaps the opposite has happened. You've taken up some negative things. Let's jump forward rather than returning to the past. And this impulse can be applied, and let's apply it if we can, to our spiritual path. What can I do in my spiritual path? What can I do in my spiritual practices that will take me forward? And this opportunity that I've been given for change, how can I make use of it to break free, perhaps, of some of the things that have happened before, and that I might actually use this opportunity as a time for spiritual growth? This attitude was something that was embedded in Master's approach to the spiritual path, the ever new, looking always for the ever new. And I think as we age in life, this is an attitude that we will want to embrace, should want to embrace. If you think back, children, maybe first couple decades of their life, they don't look back. They're not looking back to the good old days. That's for old people to do. At what point in their life do they start looking back to the good old days? If it's at 25, you think, oh my God. When you start looking backward more than you're looking forward, you know that you're on the downhill slope of your life. I think that's probably literally true. But and I think somebody that's a master, a saint, they're not looking back. They're looking forward, because that creativity, new ways to express joy. And it gives the whole attitude to one's approach to life a different flavor. So let's embrace rather than simply return to the old ruts that we're in before. Or you could say it this way: look back and take that which was helpful and good and useful for us, and let's take them and apply those things new and creatively into the future, in our outer life and also in our inner life. And so let's go forward rather than going back to normal. Joy to you.